Hey, hello all. Welcome to day two of Microsoft Build and welcome to Humans of IT session on environmental sustainability. I'm Nandadeep Nathan alongside Andrea Stenhall. We will be talking about environmental sustainability. So the most urgent challenge facing us globally maybe is to reduce our carbon emissions, and we cannot reach net zero if we don't know where we are. So in this session, we will understand the root cause of emissions by tracking actual and then avoided emissions over the time. So the agenda is like we will cover sustainability as a broader term. Then we will have a look at or analyze what kind of things that we can see to analyze our carbon footprints, and then what are those device and cloud solution strategies to reduce your carbon impact. Okay, so let us start our discussion by exploring the term sustainability itself. So it simply means meeting your own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it is pretty much difficult to mention why so many individuals, groups, as well as communities around the world are working towards this goal. But sustainability comes down to the kind of future that we are living for the next generations. So, in short, we are pretty much responsible for our environment with the activities that we do every day. So, human activities like driving, flying, using electricity, as well as industrial activities, they emit kind of a carbon or greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, and then it contributes to the global climate change. On the other hand, using the natural resources like solar energy, wind energy, as well as the maintenance of trees and forests, it can help us to balance out the emission by playing a role in the carbon offsetting. So in short, our actions define the carbon footprints that we leave behind. So at least throughout this session, our discussion will be revolving around few of the key terminologies. So let us spend some time to go through those. So first one is carbon footprint. So it is kind of a total amount of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, or even could be a water vapor that gets generated by our actions. Then we also have carbon negative. So we can call ourselves as a carbon negative when the organization removes more carbon than it emits. So if your impact is positive, meaning that you are actively doing something for the betterment of the climate. Then the carbon neutrality, it means that having a balance between emitting the carbon and absorbing the carbon from the atmosphere. And then we have net zero. So net zero is very much similar concept to the carbon neutral, but it goes beyond just carbon. So net zero refers to when all the greenhouse gases, we normally refer to them as a GHG. So those are being emitted into the atmosphere are equivalent to the those being removed from the atmosphere at a global scale. So for us who are operating in the software world, we need to have control of our environmental initiatives. So we need to capture and aggregate the sustainability data in kind of an actionable way. So I'm sure most of you have been using Microsoft offering like Microsoft Azure or Microsoft 365. So they do have data centers in the background, and all of the data centers supporting this kind of an cloud offerings consume this significant amount of energy. So as this cloud services continues to scale, their impact on the environment, it cannot be overlooked. So let us have a look at the emission calculations which are involved in this. So it involves various factors and complex formulas. There are kind of a few high level factors which are very much important for us to understand those emission calculations. So for example, if you own Microsoft Azure or Microsoft 365 kind of a tenant, then these factors will help you to understand your carbon emissions and your carbon footprints onto the higher level. So first one is active versus inactive kind of an data. So active data means which is being used frequently. Inactive, that means which hasn't been used for a certain period of time. So the power requirements for active as well as the inactive data are obviously different. Inactive data only draws power from the server they are sitting on, while the active data requires compute power as well as use of network kind of an infrastructure. But one thing to note for sure that if you have storage, you incur the carbon emissions. The second factor here is base power. So it is the power being drawn for your data storage, kind of a mechanism, for example, for cooling or for exhaust of all of your data centers. And then we have another important factor called as data center PUE, which is referred as power usage effectiveness. So it is a metric used to determine the energy efficiency of the data center. So it is a ratio that describes how efficiently a data center uses that energy. And then we also have another factor here, which is again more important factor of country specific emissions. So depending on the power source of the site and the and again from where it is likely to come, for example solar energy, coal or wind, etc., it depends. Again there are few additional cloud optimization factors involved as well. So now that it sounds interesting as well as it is complicated. So what if you want to know where and how you or your organization is contributing to all of this? So then do we have to do this calculation on our own? Do we need to go find out all these factors? So the question is probably no, because we do have the carbon emission impact dashboard available from Microsoft, which is kind of an power BI application to help understand everyone the carbon emissions associated with their cloud storage. So let us have a look at one of that emission impact dashboard that we have. So this dashboard for Microsoft 365 quantifies the greenhouse gas emissions which are associated with the usage of Microsoft 365 applications, for example, Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, as well as Microsoft Teams. So this solution or this dashboard will help organization to effectively record, report, as well as reduce the emissions across the entire enterprise. So this data is very much crucial for understanding how usage of carbon service impacts the emissions. So with that, let's get into the demo environment and see how that looks like. So this is the dashboard that I have set up into my tenant. So this is the Microsoft 365 emission dashboard. So this dashboard quantifies the total emissions as well as the carbon intensity, which is kind of a measure of emissions per active Microsoft 365 users. So from here we can see like what are those carbon emissions for the company are based on the scope 1, 2, and 3. We will cover that in a while. And then how many active users we have got. And because of those active users, how much is the metric tons of carbon being emitted in the environment. So again, we do have all that information being captured as emission details. So if you go into this page, this shows your carbon emissions over the time as well as your usage of Office 65 per time. And then again, from here, you'll be able to see which are those locations from where you are emitting those carbons. And then again, we will be able to take some actions on that. So another important area in this is emission savings. So organizations can also estimate the carbon emissions that they have avoided by moving their Exchange or SharePoint deployments to the cloud. So if you have made your move into the cloud, already you are saving onto the emissions. So you can improve the accuracy of these estimates by selecting the appropriate options to reflect the efficiency level of your on-premises alternatives and the percentage of the renewable energy usage. So for example, if you have all of your physical servers, in that case, you can go for the low efficiency scale. If you have a combination of or mix of physical and virtualized server, you can go for the medium kind of a scale, and then you can select that percentage of renewable energy purchases, and then this dashboard will help you to do that calculation for the emission saving. The another important report that we have here is this GHG preparation report, which is the greenhouse gases preparation report. So the methodology behind the dashboard calculation includes majorly three scopes: scope 1, 2, and 3, which you can see here. So scope 1 includes all of the emissions which are kind of an direct emissions results from business activities such as kind of an stationary combustion of fuels for backup power generation in the cloud data center. Then we do have scope 2 kind of an emissions which are indirectly result from the production of electricity or heat that you use, for example exhaust from any kind of an electrical power plant. Then we do also have scope 3 emission, which is again indirectly result from all of the other business activities. For example, they includes manufacturing, shipping, as well as recycling of the server being used in the data center. And then we do have all those calculation methodology being defined here. So again, to arrive at the per organization numbers provided in the dashboard, it first calculates all of those emissions for the each data center region, and then allocates portion of those emission to each customer based on the proxies for their usage of Microsoft 365 core cloud services. So it also includes data storage as well as the active usage per application. So all that thing is explained in this particular calculation in detail. But then again, simple question is like, how do I get this report? So this dashboard is available for all of the Microsoft 365 customers for business, enterprise, as well as education. So it is just a Power BI report. So you need to have at least Power BI Pro license to install and use this application. So you can install this one directly from aka.ms/m365-emissions. So after the installation, just follow all the prompts to get connected your data to the Microsoft 365 tenant, and then you will have to wait for at least 24 to 48 hours for the data to get built, and then refresh all of your data set via the workspace for the app. So this was a very much useful dashboard to get all of your emission calculated, as well as see what kind of things are causing. So as of now, we don't see the segregation of each service causing all those emissions, for example, SharePoint, OneDrive, or Microsoft Teams or Exchange, but at least it gives the overall picture of how much is the active usage of our services, and then how is the carbon emission because of that, and again because of the active as well as the inactive data. Similarly, we have another emission impact dashboard available for Microsoft Azure. So again, the main dashboard here focuses on the showcasing overall emissions as well as usage over the time, as well as carbon intensity, which is metric for carbon efficiency specific to the cloud usage. So again, let us go into the dashboard itself and explore it more. So this is the dashboard that we have set up for calculating the emissions being caused by Microsoft Azure. So the first thing here, this dashboard will show all the details, and then we do have those emission details, which shows the carbon emissions by scope year over the year, which help organization to track the trends and again make the impactful decisions about their cloud services as well as usage. Then the other thing here which we have is the emission saving. So again, here you can improve the accuracy of these estimates by selecting the appropriate option to reflect your efficiency level, either low, medium, or high. At the same time, even you can select these renewable energy purchases. The good thing with this particular report is that it help you to filter out based on your subscription, based on all of the Azure services that you are using, as well as it gives you the specific information about the emission being caused by each of the region. So you will be able to drill down into this and then get some more information. At the same time, for example, if you interested to see like how those emission calculation will take place. So there is a link here. If you can click onto this, this will give you the um, comparison of how the emission will cause when you will be on premises against when you will make your move into the cloud. So let's say we just add our workload. There are various data center regions that you can choose from here, and then you can specify what kind of an core number of cores that you will need. I will just sum it up just to save the time, and then again we will just sum up all of those data storage that one will be required. We can select the efficiency as a low, medium, or high, and just click on calculate. So this one will give us the emission calculations when we will use this from the online services of Microsoft Azure versus what will be the emission estimates when we will have all those on-premises resources provisioned. So this can give us the simple calculations for those, and then this emission impact dashboard will help you save some energy as well as reduce your carbon footprints. So again, we do have the GHG greenhouse gases preparation report, which again includes three scope of emissions defined by your GHG protocol. So these are two kind of a dashboard I quickly wanted to show you. So whenever you are implementing your solutions into the cloud or in the on-premises, do follow these dashboards to see how much emission you are causing, how is the usage, as well as then what are those emission details you have. Then how you can plan your sustainable journey. So firstly that you can track the as well as categorize the data center emissions with these tools, which I just have shown you, the Microsoft Sustainability Calculator to reveal the insights and justify the migration. Secondly, you can enable the automated responses on the cloud through services like Azure IoT to monitor the resource usage, scale application, as well as reduce your carbon footprints while controlling the cost. And then again, make your move to the cloud, migrate to the cloud, because moving on-premises data center operations to the cloud can significantly reduce uh, carbon emissions, and again it can increase your energy efficiency. And then again, for that simplicity, you can use the migration tools like Azure Migrate, which can simplify your migration move. Then when it comes to the personal front, like what is my role in sustainability? So in that case, every one of us has very much important role to play in the sustainability. So firstly, analyze your carbon footprints. So for each of the resources as well as data that you own in the cloud, analyze all of its carbon emissions, try to reduce them, and then use the sustainable by design kind of technologies. So adapt to the cloud and AI services to cut your energy consumption and then reduce the physical footprints. And then thirdly, identify your active versus inactive data. So the data could be in the form of your Azure resources, or if you're using Microsoft 365, then it could be in the form of SharePoint files, SharePoint sites, OneDrive files, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Stream videos. So just analyze that. And then again, archive or delete that inactive data, but at the same time, strike the perfect balance between your retention policies as well as the inactive data, so that you will not have the unnecessary data. At the same time, you will respect your retention policies as well. So follow all those things, plan to reduce your carbon footprints. And then here are few of those resources, the valuable resources that will help you explore on this topic very much more. And then adopting these sustainable practices, whether it is large or small, it can have a significant impact in the long run. And now that we just have explored how we'll be able to reduce our carbon footprints in the cloud, but at the same time, there is another side of it, that how we can do that with the devices that we use. So for that, I will hand it over to my colleague Andreas, who will walk us through on that topic. Right. So Andreas, please take it over.
Thank you very much, Nandip, for this introduction. And let's see if I can get my slide deck up and running. Perfect. So thank you very much, Nandip. And thank you for the introduction. So yeah, I'm Andreas Stenhall. I'm from Stockholm, Sweden, and I work as an advisor and architect in the modern workplace area as a consultant. So I'm also an MVP on Windows and devices for IT for the last 13 years. So, and I have a true passion for the Windows client operating system, I must say. So I'm now combining this with my work with my personal beliefs around climate impact and making a difference. So that's why I'm here speaking about this particular topic. So I see my mission to inspire IT departments all over the globe to do all they can in reducing carbon emissions and providing a brighter future. So it's as simple as that. So the fact is that IT departments, they can do so much more than just enabling sort of double-sided printing to save some paper. By knowing the impact and with making the right choices, the carbon emissions generated by the computers and other devices as well that exist within an organization can rather easily be reduced by half or even more than that. So moving on, the how to achieve this is what's coming up next. So before looking at options, how you can reduce carbon impact, let's talk about the impact the computer and other common devices have when it comes to carbon emissions. So laptop computers used in organizations, they typically range between slightly above 100 kilograms of carbon up to around 600 throughout the device lifecycle. So having looked at the most common laptop models used in organizations, I would say that the typical or average organization, they average at about 300 to 400 kilograms of carbon per laptop. So let's consider that as some kind of baseline, which I'm going to use moving forward throughout this presentation. And as we are at the Build conference, where we typically have developers as attendees, I must say that the developer machines, which are larger, heavier, and more powerful, they account for more carbon emissions than a typical average information worker laptop. And it is not unusual that they are above 600 kilos of carbon equivalents. So last but not least, mobile phones, or should I say brand new smartphones, on the other hand, they typically account for less than 100 kilograms of carbon. And my own smartphone, for instance, which is rather popular and modeled from a larger brand, it weighs in at around 69 kilograms of carbon, for instance. So now this is, a lot of numbers, you think, but what do they actually mean? And to set these numbers in some kind of context, I have some examples which are easier to relate to than just a number of kilograms of carbon. So this is absolutely necessary to get the understanding of how much carbon a laptop equivalents to. So 300 kilograms of carbon for a laptop is approximately the same amount of emissions generated by a 3-hour round-trip flight. But it can also be the equivalent of slightly above 36,000 smartphones being fully charged. And to set this in even more context of equivalence to other fossil comparisons, it means almost 34 gallons or 154 liters of gasoline consumed, or about 330 pounds or 150 kilograms of coal burned. So let this sink in for a moment. We are talking about the emissions by one laptop computer here. And I think with this, you get the picture, and I hope you see that making more climate smart choices when it comes to choosing your devices and other devices, when it comes to computers and devices, I should say, really can make a difference for the climate. So what is it that generates the carbon for a device? Well, to start with, I must say that note that this is varying between brands, models of devices, so keep that in mind. But the fact is, most of the carbon is generated when the device is manufactured. So about 75 to 85% of carbon is generated at this point. The other two areas, they vary a lot depending on a few factors. And to start with, the second largest area that generates the carbon is day-to-day use of the device. And the numbers here, they differ a lot depending on where you are located in the world, and more specifically, where the electricity that is used by your device comes from. There is a big difference between electricity originating from 100% renewable or green sources and electricity that come from, for instance, a coal power plant. So the third largest area that generates emissions is by transporting of the device from factory to you as a customer. So the closeness of where the device is manufactured to where it is sent differs, of course, as do the form of transport, depending on if it's by plane, by boat, or by truck. There are some other areas as well that has an impact, and two other noteworthy such are number one, the packaging of the device which it is shipped in, and also disposal and recycling of the hardware when it has reached end of life. So they are the runners up to these three major areas. But the key takeaway here is that the vast majority of carbon is generated as part of manufacturing. And this is what we take with us when we start talking about making a true difference. So let's take some time now. We have come to the point where we need to look at, or can look, should I say, at 4 very actionable things you can do to reduce the carbon emissions in your organization. I would say it's all about rethinking or reimagining your device strategy altogether. And number one, and the absolutely easiest thing is to increase the time frame after which you typically exchange or replace a computer or other device, even extending this by 1 year so that you keep the device, for instance, for 4 years rather than 3 has a huge impact and is a real carbon saver. So extending it even more, yeah, the more you gain, the more the climate gain. Of course, you will have to take factors such as support, security, and hardware updates into consideration in your strategy. Number two, it's yeah, this is not an easy one, but something to at least think about. So I'm planting a seed here. The option to buy refurbished hardware might not even exist in your country or market. And if it is not, yeah, I would say what a business opportunity. But at least bear refurbished hardware with you. There are many times refurbished hardware to purchase in at least a few markets, and they are offered through third-party companies in various conditions also, I should say, because it's could be in mint condition or other conditions. Very good condition. So it's all up to you and well worth looking into if this is a real option to go with. Number three, replacing traditional stationary computers or laptops and start using lighter hardware, such as thin clients or tablets, and combining this with using cloud data center to deliver the desktop or applications through Windows 365 or Azure Virtual Desktop. It is a great option to reduce carbon emissions, not only less carbon for the devices, but also as this enables you to use net zero emission and zero waste data centers from Microsoft. This is an option to really think about. And it might be good for at least some use cases, maybe not all use cases. And last but not least, number four. You will sooner or later come to a point where you need to buy new hardware devices. And what I would like to take, what I would like you to take with you from here is that when you do, evaluate and make sure that you choose the most climate-friendly devices fitting your needs. Let it be productivity, security, development, or other. For instance, I'm personally very interested in learning more about the project Volterra that Microsoft announced yesterday at the keynote. So that can be a real game changer for developers and setting the path moving forward. So when doing the evaluation for which devices are the most climate smart ones, it might be very good to know that all major vendors such as HP, Dell, Lenovo, and of course Microsoft, they publish the carbon emission footprint for each model that is released. And they have done so for the last few years. So computer models for the last few years, they have this in place as PDFs. So my strong recommendation here is to assess what devices you are currently purchasing and what the carbon footprint is for those, and then compare that to see how much it could potentially save in terms of carbon emissions just by choosing similar models to what you are already purchasing, and potentially also from another vendor than you are currently using. So this is a list of where to find these documents, as I just referred to. This can also be very easily found if you search on internet using your favorite search engine, and all you have to search for is basically the manufacturer and adding the keyword either eco or carbon footprint, and it will take you to these links. So you will also find them later in this presentation. So to summarize all of this, I would say that by rethinking your device strategy, you will likely and rather easily be able to cut carbon emissions by half of your existing state. And it can be done just by purchasing the least carbon generating devices or computer. So if you at the same time extend the hardware refresh lifecycle and potentially switch more over to cloud PCs, you will be able to get this down even further and having greater savings on carbon impact. Thinking back to the slide of what just one computer is the equivalent of, just imagine how much you can reduce your carbon impact if you multiply this with the number of computers in your organization. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and Nandip. And now let's switch over to some Q&A. Do we have any questions? Please raise your hands or enter them in the chat.
I see one hand raised from Richard. If someone can
Okay,
unmute Richard.
I think we can do it.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Richard.
I'm sorry, I had to join late, so if you covered this, I missed it. But I'm just wondering how much the process of e-waste recycling reduces devices' carbon impact. The total life cycle. I also spoke to, or I suppose, wondering how effective are those e-waste programs?
Okay, so I didn't really hear everything, but around the waste handling of the devices, as I understand.
Yes, the e-waste recycling. So rather than just throwing your computer away, giving it to the facilities that are supposed to properly recycle these devices. I'm wondering how large of an effect those have on reducing the total environmental impact.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have a straight up answer to that. If you look at, I have to look into the details. It depends on the vendor, etc. But if you look at this from what the vendors produce, yeah, the impact in the overall device perspective revolves around 1% of the total for device lifecycle. But that's taking care of the recycling part. But then it's all a question about how much can be reused, and then moving the sort of what do you say? Don't find the right word in English. Yeah, carrying the benefit forward, so to say. But that's an area I am going to look into much more than today. So I can't give you a straight up answer to that question. But I would be keen to follow it up with you offline for sure. So please reach out and follow me on Twitter if you have the possibility.
Sure. I guess there is another question for you, Andreas, from Siddharth. He is saying, do we see carbon footprint on devices, boxes anywhere?
Okay. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't seen that yet, but it will likely be something that will appear, I assume. I haven't seen it personally, so let's see if it will appear, because I think we are, in general, the world is becoming more and more aware of the carbon impact. So it's not unlikely that we will see some kind of measurement, or what should I say, some kind of standard that we can use to present this in a good way, so it's also comparable. But I haven't seen it yet. I will bring that question with me and look into it and see what the major vendors, what they have to say about it. It's a great question.
Yeah, there is another one from Annette. She liked the presentation. The question is, what do you think are the biggest obstacles or risk associated with extending lifetimes of laptop for IT organization?
Yeah, there are some risks, of course. That's why I mentioned the security part, because you can't extend it forever, because as we know, security is very, very important. And security nowadays means also not patching only Windows or software or any kind of software, but also patching your hardware. So it's very important to make sure that you are covered by security updates for the hardware, basically updates to firmware, BIOS, etc. So that's the biggest risk I see as moving forward, because yeah, security is at the top of list for many organizations, as it should. So security, I would say, is the biggest risk. That's what you have to take into consideration when and if you do extend it. And also maybe missing out on new security features, because that's another angle. Because we know that the latest generation of models, they have even better security than previous models, often at least, new security features, etc. So that could also be an angle. You could be a little bit behind in security if you are extending the life of the devices. Great question. So no other questions, or do we have any hands raised? No.
Okay, there is just one question on feedback. Link is not working. Let me just recheck that. Okay, the feedback link should be ak.ms/Microsoft build evals. Oh, sorry for the big text there, but okay, this is the link. Okay, does it work for you? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, all right. Yeah, Miss, at least I don't see any other questions in the chat window. But yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat window, or maybe feel free to raise your hand. And if you want to get us connected with after this session, we have our social media handlers here. So feel free to get in touch with us for the follow up on this session. All right.
Perfect. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So
let's
yeah,
round it
Miss,
up.
hopefully our session is kind of an awareness session, so that we can start working towards the good atmosphere, good climate, and then a few of the more things that we can avoid for reducing our carbon footprints. Because together only we can build a sustainable future, right?
Yeah, thank you very much for attending, and yeah, take care, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for attending. We wish you a nice build